So yeah, should have just bought a new wheel well, but it's all fixed now. I got about halfway through fixing it, and when I decided I should have just bought one, but I was too far into the project at that stage. I just kept finding more and more little rust holes, but it's all fixed up now to a pretty reasonable level. The next thing to do is to fix up this flange that I brutalised when I was removing it, bend it back to a 90 degree, nice 90 degrees, so when it sits down it sits flush with the floor. So more hammering. A quick tour of the wheel well and all the repairs. A lot of welding and a lot of panel beating to get it all straight again, but it's looking pretty nice. And zero rust. So this is the edge we need to sort of re-90 degree, and we'll do that with a hammer and a couple of bits of metal. So this is the plan. I've got a little block of steel that I've chamfered the edge on, just so it'll sit up flush against the side of the wheel well, and then I can knock over the return lip. That little block because it's not tall enough. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks. It's come up pretty nicely. Actually didn't take too long once I got the technique down. So got a good even bend. Gone through with the finger sander and gone over all the holes for the spot welds to clean them all up and try and keep the contamination to a minimum. Before I weld it, I'll give it all a wipe down with acetone. So the wheel well, I think, is ready to go. So time to leave the comforts of the workshop and go back outside and try and fit it. But first, you're not going to believe it, but I found more holes in the boot. So a couple of welds there. First, because I need the spare wheel well hole to get access to those other holes. It's all about holes today. That's what she said. And spare wheel well in. Okay, well here's that hole I was talking about. It's been hole sawed out. I don't know what went through there. To be honest, I probably did it at some stage, but I can't remember. Which is nice because it meant I didn't have to cut anything out. I just had to do a little hole saw trick to make a little patch up. The only problem is I can't work out a decent way to hold it. I've got it sitting there on a little magnet at the moment, which looks great, but as you can imagine, magnets and welding electricity interact with each other in a fairly bizarre and sometimes violent fashion. I've got the magnet offset. Hopefully I'm far enough away where I can just get a tack on and then I can work my way around, but we'll see how we go. Alright, so I sat down with about 500 million electrons and we had a bit of a discussion, and they agreed to play the game. Unfortunately, the other 500 million electrons decided that they'd dance around all over the shop, so that was pretty interesting. But I've managed to get a tack on there, and it looks like I should be able to get it reasonably flat and continue tacking the piece in. So keep going. Okay, that's come up very nicely. One less hole, only a few billion to go. So we're getting dangerously close to putting the spare wheel well back in the car. I've cleaned up the underside. I just need to clean up behind the rear guard there, get rid of some more sound deadener so it doesn't contaminate the weld. And then we may even be able to drop the spare wheel well back in. Very exciting. Okay, I think it might be time to drop this spare wheel well in. Drop's probably not the right word. I think this is going to need some gentle persuasion based on how hard it was to get out. The important thing to do at a time like this is not to panic when it doesn't fit. Now normally I'd have at least 5 beers before I'd attempt this, but unfortunately I've got to drive somewhere later on, so we're going to have to do this relatively sober. See how we go. don't believe it. Alright. Not bad at all. Lining up with all the holes. In. So now I've just got to work out a sneaky way of pulling all the panels tight together while I weld it, because obviously there's very little areas to get a clamp. So that is the next problem to solve. Okay, so I decided to go a different way, and instead of welding the spare weld in, I've screwed it down with a bunch of self-tappers, just to give it that real race car look. But to keep everything professional, as you can see, I've made sure to use exactly the same screws and washers all the way around. Alright, I'll weld it in. Oh, I might turn the welder off AC first. I admit it looks like a fairly aggressive way of clamping the spare wheel well down, but I don't have 50 Cleco clamps. Have you any idea how expensive those things are? Anyway, I already had a pilot hole drilled from where I drilled the spot weld, so I'm really not doing any damage to that bottom panel, and it's pulled down quite nicely, and they'll also be really easy to take out from the top side as I work my way around. I was thinking about using pot rivets, but the holes were too small for the pot rivets. I would have had to drill them out for those, and that would have required me drilling the pot rivets out, and to be honest, I'm pretty lazy. I had to find a way to clamp it down. If I hadn't clamped it down, there's no way the wheel well would just sit there while I spot welded it in. It would lift up as the metal sort of buckles underneath, and it would look hideous. Anyway, so the idea is to just go around, undo the screws as I go, and then just keep welding up the holes. Got a few done, and the poor man's Cleco clamps are doing the job. They're sandwiching the two panels together nicely, and I'm getting very little warpage. One thing I have found that's making a big difference is just putting a little bit of aluminium up against the edge to stop blowing through that the little edge there. Particularly useful when the spot welds are right up at that edge, and sometimes they've even broken through. Yeah, I think the Italian that was in charge of the spot welder had a pretty big night the day before he attached this wheel well. The spot welds are all over the shop. But yeah, all good, just carry on. Going through a hell of a lot of filler wire. Spare wheel well install. That was a lot of welding and a lot of grinding, but very happy with the result. All looks good, looks pretty factory, and there's rust free and relatively straight. So the last thing to do before we can call the boot done is to drill out the holes for the fuel pump mounts around the surround. So onto that now. So I've already had the fuel tank in. I've marked out all the holes with a scribe, and I'm just going to go around and center punch them and drill them out. And I've just got a block of wood with the jack under there to provide some support so I don't bend my nice straight return lip. That is one blunt drill. So all the mounting holes have been drilled in, and that completes the boot floor. Very happy with how it's all come up. There's still some work to clean up all the welds on the underside, but I've run out of abrasives and enthusiasm for the boot floor and going to move on to something else. So drawing a line in the sand and calling that done.